Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the GCF side event on adaptation, from readiness to transformational programs. Now, in this roundtable, we have two parts, and we would be highlighting progress of the developing countries in planning and implementation of adaptation action as part of their contribution to the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC. The event would further explore the GCF's experience in strengthening developing countries' capacity to undertake transformational planning and programming that are aligned with their NDCs, adaptation communications, and also their national adaptation plans, and also including other climate strategies that are very broad-based at national level, including the stakeholder consultations that countries normally undertake. We would also be looking at how we support investment from the private sector, funding for smallholder farmers in Africa, reshaping public credit lines towards sustainable and resilient agriculture and livestock, production practices for adaptation in Ecuadorian forest, the GCF investment in climate projects that are ensuring a strategic approach to driving paradigm shift towards climate resilience and focusing on country ownership and the specific needs of beneficiaries. We would also be highlighting the role of the GCF in catalyzing innovation and leveraging finance at scale towards transition towards adaptive management and resilient pathways. So I have the privilege of introducing our distinguished panelists. I have from my immediate left, Kavita Shinha, who is the Deputy Director of the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation, and Mr. Hans Andre Jamba, who is the NDA of the Democratic Republic of Congo, followed by Santiago Aprico, who is the NDA of Colombia. Then the next panelist that would be coming in the second phase, we have Ms. Philomena Nelson, who is working for the Pacific Regional Environment Program, and Ms. Leslie Lobruto, who is the head of the investment strategy of Acumen Fund. And then on the far left, we have Andreas Roman, who is the Director AI of the Independent Evaluation Unit of the GCF. So let me start by having a video from the GCF on the support we are providing. Can we have the video, please?
The Paris Agreement recognizes climate adaptation and mitigation as equally crucial. Climate change is accelerating. It is hitting communities hard. Communities need to find new ways to adapt. Adapting now can protect the health, livelihoods, and safety of millions. GCF is investing heavily in climate adaptation projects. Investments that are making a difference. Building systems to collect critical climate and weather data. Protecting scarce water resources, ecosystems and coasts. Protecting and restoring coral reefs with innovative investments. Transforming infrastructure. Boosting food security. Helping communities to adapt to climate change. GCF is committed to reaching a 50-50 split between adaptation and mitigation, investing where needs are greatest. Green Climate Fund, raising ambition, empowering action.
Thank you very much for your attention. So we would start with the first part of the panelists. And that is going to focus on the vision of the Readiness. The Readiness Preparatory Support Program provides capacity building and enhancing policy development, supporting countries on coordination and pipeline development, and also knowledge sharing. So I would start with Kavita. Kavita, could you let us know the vision for adaptation within the GCF? What are the achievements so far, and what are the barriers that developing countries are facing?
Thank you, Pa, for that very interesting question to set the frame for the discussion here. As we all know, the window of opportunity for taking climate action, especially for adaptation, is shrinking fast. With the world's already seen warming over 1 degree Celsius so far compared to pre-industrial era. And if nothing else is done, then by the end of the century, we will face upward of 2 degrees Celsius in terms of warming. And the people who will be the most affected have been the least responsible for what needs to be done and the action that's coming. So GCF is really very, very committed to making sure that our fund flows to the people who need, the most vulnerable, is effective, and that we are able, our vision and our strategy is able to reach to them the fastest. In terms of finance flows for adaptation, the finance flow in generally, climate finance flow for climate action to developing countries is generally lacking. The climate policy initiatives estimate of $600 billion of climate financial flows in 2020. Though it's good news that it's increased, it's very small share of that goes to developing countries. Within that, largely for mitigation, and that too for large emerging economies. The amount of money flowing to adaptations for especially the smaller, more vulnerable countries is really meager, and this needs to be corrected. The scale of funding required by 2040, by some estimates, is $6 trillion. So compared to $600 billion, that's a humongous jump. No amount of public sector financing can meet that. So one of GCF's vision for supporting the developing countries on adaptation is to be able to work on mobilizing both public and private capital that would otherwise not flow to adaptation. And we are committed to maintaining, in our funding, maintaining 50-50 balance between adaptation and mitigation. You heard that. And within the adaptation funding, we have a commitment to make sure that at least 50% of that goes towards SIDS, LDCs, and Africa, the countries that are most vulnerable to the climate. In order to mobilize the funding that is required, GCF follows a four-pronged approach. Our first prong is about integrated planning and programming policies. The funding that we have under Readiness that Pa alluded to for national adaptation planning and other ways of integrated holistic planning is part of our first prong, is to ensure that the countries have the resources to be able to plan for adaptation, to convert their planning into what policy barriers that might be there to address those, address the institutional barriers, as well as create a pipeline of bankable projects that could then be funded. So within that, countries are eligible to get up to $3 million to do that planning. We have so far approved 69 projects for about over $125 million for adaptation planning already. Some of that adaptation planning is now looking at developing concept notes to then access GCF and other climate finance. We have about 150 odd concept notes under preparation. Our second prong is to be able to catalyze innovation. And that is to ensure that we put our resources where innovations in either technology that's needed for adaptation, innovations in business model. As all of us here, I'm singing to the choir here, know that adaptation is fairly new as in the finance world, and models for business models or models for doing adaptation project financing is very limited. So we are looking at catalyzing some of that. A recent project that we funded with the CRDB, one of our DAEs in Tanzania, is for funding adaptation technology enterprises in Tanzania for agriculture. And the work that is being done there is a combination of our funding to make sure that the people who are unbanked outside of the financial world, inclusion, actually have the resources to do that. So we're deploying our funds very catalytically. The DFIs are getting some funding from us as loans as line of credit to on-lend to enterprises. But enterprises have a credit enhancement from us. The guarantee fund is being used to enhance their credit rating so that they can actually be eligible to take that fund. In addition to that, we are using grant funding to ensure that there is insurance for the smallholder farmers, that in case something fails, as their income levels and as their resiliency is building up, the risk is transferred to the insurance. So it's a combination of instruments that is allowing and catalyzing innovation of technologies to make the enterprises flourish. So that's one example. The third prong is what we are more known for, which is financing at scale. And some of our large projects that people often hear of enables that. We are oftentimes the first investors, either first loss capital investment in equity or a junior tranche loan, that then catalyzes other investors to come behind us. Two of the projects, I think one of our partners are here and they will talk about it, so I will not repeat that, the Coral Reef Fund. But I will talk about another project that we did which illustrates this, which is the IDB Amazon project. Our partner there is IDB. It's the Amazon Bioeconomy project. Again, a combination of instruments are deployed, grants, guarantees, reimbursable grants, and loans for the entire value chain of enterprises who would otherwise not invest in bioeconomy. Starts at the very lowest end of micro-enterprises where the funds are deployed largely through grant type of instruments in what would be called in the traditional investment world as venture capital. So really, really small on the grant side to all the way to bond issuances by medium-sized enterprises who are currently maybe in other types of businesses, but helping them pivot to bioeconomy to ensure sustainability of the world's lungs, if you will, the Amazon biome. So that's our third prong. And our fourth prong is on catalyzing innovation, catalyzing knowledge and sharing and creating feedback loops so that the systems and processes that we are learning together then goes back into ensuring that the norms that are catalyzed and set forward enables a systemic shift in future. So that's our vision, and we look forward to working with all our partners in enabling that. You asked about barriers. If I may take one.
Yeah, please.
So if I may take just a couple of minutes. I alluded to one barrier already, which is the lack of proper metrics, lack of proper business models to be able to create what the financial world requires, good bankable projects. And I think some of the early stage of work that we are doing and the evidence that we are generating through combination of readiness programs as well as our projects will address some of the barriers. We're also working, looking forward to contributions from all our partners out there who have developed other metrics, other systems to measure and create bankable frameworks for this to be able to scale up. The hurdle rates for doing something which is new is traditionally in the finance world always high, and that's where blending the GCF financing through a multiple mechanism enables to cross that hurdle rates or create sequencing of risk that enables projects to come. It's early days, but I think we have some good examples to move forward on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kavita, for that. Let me come to Santiago. Santiago, what can we learn from Colombia's experience in driving climate action through the use of readiness funds for adaptation planning and funding proposal pipeline development? And how can GCF also improve on the support we are providing on adaptation project and program development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it's working. It is? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Following what Kavitas was mentioning about the importance of really making the knowledge management and making that loop report, I'm going to focus on specifically on some specific insights that we have. We developed the NAP readiness at Colombia, and as one of the parts and one of the key elements of the chain for passing from planification to action was having a project pipeline. That is that missing link to really mobilize climate finance. And we began facing the challenge of really how we can really begin finding the projects all around the country and not only in the 5 main cities. So the first entrance point that we have was, okay, let's try to, as we say, like throw the right hooks on all the territory. So we make this through a digital strategy, like a basic digital strategy, and it was something that really worked really well for us. So we create an online form using a free system. I don't know if it was Google or Microsoft, whatever, but that worked really helped. And from the form itself, we began defining the specific criteria in 2 senses. Criteria for measuring the climate rationale of the project, but also important, measuring 2 things. Measuring if the institution that was going to present the project was suitable and it has the strengths needed for surpassing all the process for structuring a project to the GCF. And the third element was if they really have clear who was the right partner in terms of the accredited entity. So, and this is interesting. It looks really simple, but we defined the form specifically with all the questions so that we prevent receiving a lot of projects that were going to be a failure in a future for this specific source of financing. So that was one key element. We were successful. We received more than 100 or more like projects. We were only looking for 5-6 projects to have some concept notes and funding proposal, but this was the opportunity for constructing the pipeline, the adaptation pipeline for the country. So nowadays we have 46 more or less projects of adaptation that comply the criteria I mentioned you. The 6 projects that we were looking for structuring the concept notes and funding proposal, we have been moving forward with them, and we already include them in the country program of the GCF, and we are in the process of finding funding of the GCF. But in that process, it occurs something interesting, is that a lot of people, because there exists appetite for the projects, other financing sources has come to us as NDA and began asking us about the project. So we have been seeing like a lot of, may I call it like flirting to the projects. So fortunately, they are going to be financed from different sources. So that's one good point. And a second point I want to mention is about the importance of not only having on the pipeline like projects that are looking for grants, but also projects that may be looking for equity or having a guarantee. And that leads me to the private sector. So we, thanks to the GCF, we also achieved having a strategy for improving the climate risk management in the enterprises in Colombia. And this was key because we began opening the discussion with them, how they can become more climate resilient, how they can prevent losing competitiveness, and this led us to have like a whole discussion on how the private sector in Colombia can get used of the window that is called the simplified approval process. That is that this window that is like, it has like a more simple procedures than the common windows, and it's a window that is until 10 million, I think. So those 2 efforts have helped us to really began realizing that there are projects on the territories, there are needs on the territories, but we need is to correct the imperfection of information and the imperfection of encountering the two sides. So hopefully we will be like having these projects rolling on next year. And you were mentioning another successful project that was the coral reefs project. that we have found also that some accredited entities, they found difficult really structuring projects if they are not of a certain ticket of amount of value. So we have found really useful when we have regional projects. So the project Kavita was mentioning about bioeconomy, that was with some countries of the Amazon basin, that where we share like some context, and so it's worthwhile sharing with them like this process. And as well the project of coral reefs, that was with I think more than 7 countries. So I think that's another direction that where we are going to see how you can get advantage of some regional projects that obviously respect and are country driven according to our needs. So thank you.
No, thank you very much for giving us that country-driven, bottom-up approach, aligning the various aspirations and priorities of the various regions of the country with the GCF criteria. So, but how can GCF improve its support to adaptation projects and program development in Colombia? Can you share that with countries?
Well, we have a lot of needs, so it's difficult for where to which one signal. But I think that a key element is being rigorous with the country program follow-up and the evaluation. I think that's key, and also with the readiness. I think that the readiness should be like a staircase. So we already make this step, then okay, you can go to the next step. But someone needs to tell you, to invite you to really take a more wise approach to the readiness, because that's the idea. So I would highlight those 2 elements, and maybe pushing further the outreach strategies. I think that a lot of people still don't know that the GCF exists, or don't know exactly that the GCF is for certain type of projects, that they should have a specific characteristic for creating like the paradigm shift. So it's not a normal and traditional like banking institution, or so that's, I think the outreach activities would be really, really valuable to have those in different parts of Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that useful insight. I think it's something that we would take note of. Let me come to Hans. Hans, could you share with us your experience, DRC's experience in using the national adaptation planning, particularly in the process of prioritization of your needs in adaptation and the pipeline, and how can we better improve our service and support to the countries?
Thank you, Pa, for giving me just the floor. I believe DRC is went through many experiences I can share with the participants, the audience. First of all, you know, DRC is a big country. That means we have 26 provinces. So we had to select the 5 first provinces. It was the first exercises. Which province we can just put in the NAP planning? Fortunately for DRC, we start to work on the NAP before NAP become NAP. Because that time, we selected in the past 5 provinces, but the context coming during the NAP changed I can say the paradigm in DRC in terms of choice. Why? Because at that time we have almost 12 provinces, but politicians they divided all these provinces. We have now 26 provinces. That means it became a new challenge we had to face. So, beside the challenge of the number of provinces we have today, we have a kind of advantage. In the past, the FEM mechanism just try to develop with UNDP in DRC, in Kivu. Kivu is a big, it used to be a big province, but now they split it in 3 provinces. So it was a kind of advantage we have already, that in terms of readiness and in terms of funding the pipeline, because it was almost 80 million of USD. That means there's a part of readiness, another part for the pipeline. So the other things I can say, especially when I'm talking about the one we are just talking today about what we submit in the GCF, we have some new event phenomenon coming in DRC. I can say when you divide provinces, that means the main administrators stay in one, and there's 2 provinces, they need to organize themselves. That means that we are facing what I keep telling people, it's about the city or province vulnerability. The city should build first its own resilience before to build the resilience of people. That's another issue we face in DRC. However, I can say that the DRC, the first phase was very interesting because in the beginning when we start to do it, the articles or literature we didn't think about the cities, in this process. But when we saw what's happened in all these provinces split, we try to introduce now the city issue. We didn't have it in the beginning. Also, I believe one of the last things I can share with you is at the end we discussed who has been invited in the president's office. So, according to the recent studies, it showed that most of the provinces in DRC has a 98% of vulnerabilities. Can you imagine? In this type of situation, it became very hard to say, okay, how can we decide? But we have this, fortunately for us, they say, okay, just can you start by the 5-1, the old one you did, so it can help you to get all the data, and we'll be just following up in the second phase. Because the second phase of DRC is now underway. We already start, it's almost 8% already of progress. So we'll be just submitting in GCF. But it's not easy because about the vulnerability of this state today, most of the provinces I'm talking about, especially in the second phase, most of them has a 98% of vulnerabilities. So they need to organize the administration. They need to have to do some planning before, we can just move forward. That's what we have as experience in DRC case.
No, thank you, and for highlighting also the challenges in terms of prioritization when everybody is vulnerable. Now, can you share with us experiences or the challenges you face with stakeholder engagement, particularly the non-government stakeholders, let's say maybe the private sector?
Yes, you're right, because most of time, I can see how even the GCF is struggling to bring the private sector. So that's why this is the only thing, the main thing we are facing too, especially in DRC. We don't have any more private sector strong, the one we used to have before the wars started in DRC. Today we have a private sector very, very weak. So that's why most of the activity we are doing, we try to invite them, but it's very hard. We did wherever we can do to bring them in the game. But you can see, I remember one time we say, okay, what we're supposed to do now? Since we are calling them, they don't come. We went to organize in their own building, in the room, 50 chairs. You have 5 people. So they don't come. So I believe the one of the big problems the private sector is facing, that I want to just talk, as an economist and financial guy. The problem is that we need to go where business want to go. But in the same time, let us create a kind of enabling environment in the country like DRC. So it can just attract some people. Second, I remember when I was the deputy of the minister, the deputy in chief of the Ministry of Environment, I just proposed them to create what we call the green certificate. That means encouraging private sector. We are bringing some change in the villages, bringing the solar mechanism. So we start this process in DRC. But unfortunately, politically, it's hard to keep going on. When a minister is gone, everything is gone. So, and we are trying to think for now. There are too many issues we can develop to attract this non-governmental sector, but we need mostly, like what I can say in DRC, we need to create a kind of a climate business specific for the green investment. At that time, some businesses, I can tell you, some of them are already in the way to come now, because they say, okay, I say, listen, you can have two windows. You can have two windows. You work for the classic investment, and you work for the green investment. And the green part, you have many advantages than if you go to the classic one. So some of them, we try with one, which is today the delivery partner in DRC, Beseco. They have now two windows, and they feel like it's good now to go that way. That's the innovation we try to make in DRC. Thank you.
Thank you for that insight. And let me give the opportunity for the audience to ask the three panelists any question, if you have any. At least two before we go to the next panelists. Yes, could you let us know where are you from and then ask the question?
Okay, thank you. I'm Joshua I'm from Uganda. My question is quite simple. A number of projects have actually been going on from the past years, and these mainly focus on community and, of course, young people, youth. But we notice that these always lack continuity. Maybe by the end of the funding, that's when the project actually ends. So I would like to know, what strategies does the GCF have in place to ensure that maybe henceforth or moving forward, we have projects that continue even afterwards, even after maybe funding has withdrawn, or ensuring that communities are actually empowered to own the projects that are actually running? Yeah, thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah, thank you, Joshua, for bringing that up. That was also exactly what I was thinking about in terms of, young people are inheriting the consequences of what's happening, and yet financing mechanisms have incredible barriers for access. What is the GCF planning on in terms of ensuring that young people can have capacity building to overcome those barriers, but also shifting those barriers to climate finance? And making sure that there's consistent and predictable funding for the work that we're doing. Because investing in young people has incredible impacts in communities, and I think that's something that's really under-addressed at COP26.
Thank you. So I would ask Kavita to give us the sustainability aspect of the project design. What guidance do we give to countries in terms of designing projects, and ask Hans and Santiago to give us how they factor young people in designing their projects and implementation. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Well, in GCF, among the investment criteria, two of them are critical, I think, for addressing the question that you raised. One is a paradigm shift. One of the sub-indicators under that is about replicability, sustainability, and scalability. We want to make sure that the projects that we fund are not one-off projects that die after the project financing end, but that the mechanisms that are being created within the project have an impact that can enable a larger chain and sustainability after the project. The second element of investment is on the sustainability angle, and that also looks at the people and the impacts, as well as the sustainability of the finance itself. Combination, depending on how the project is structured, that may manifest itself in different ways. And I could give you examples. Going back to the example that I used in my earlier comments about the CRDB Tanzania Climate Adaptive Agriculture Project, where the element of creating a new financing products at the local DFIs is the way we are enabling it, and using our guarantee funds to create a credit enhancement for the local communities. We are hoping that during the life of the project, the commercial bank is then able to create more sustainable products that they can continue to on-lend, having learned from the experience of what we are doing. And as a result of the guarantees credit enhancement, more people would have come into the financial inclusion mechanism as a result of it. So that's just an example.
Thank you, Kavita. Hans, can you let us know how you factor in young people in your project design and also sensitization?
Yes, I believe that I heard Santiago tell about what they have as a database in the beginning. We had the same experience. Most young people, they have projects. They have projects, but the big deal is, I can say, the big issue will be the mechanism itself, because sometimes they need to have the accredited entity. He said most of accredited entity they don't care about now 10 million projects. They are caring about 1 billion and all these things. So strategically, I keep telling people, especially in stakeholder in DRC, I say, listen, don't bring to me all these 10 millions, because it will just stay here forever. Try to do a kind of group, try to bring a big group and a high amount, so we can have find an accredited entity. That's the big barrier. So most of those young people, they are very, very innovative. I can tell you, they do things you cannot imagine. But like I said, as NDA, I need just to provide them guidance. And most of the time, I'm planning now next year to start organizing a kind of meeting of young people, so I can see the innovations, and from there we can just try to develop some big project. That's what I'm just trying to go to.
Thank you. Thank you. Santiago, please.
Yeah, thank you. Two points to raise here. That's one, that we have also been aware that we are receiving different kind of projects of different themes, different quantity, and different expectations of time. So we have created something that we have called it's like a climate finance tinder, if you make like a matchmaking tool, so that we know what we are receiving and who is offering who what, and we try to make the match, so it's like a switchboard. So we have been doing that, not only centering on large sources that would like the GCF. So that's one specific thing. And the second element that I want to comment is how we have been able of being more rigorous of knowing which projects we are selecting or not to present to the GCF. And so we have been checking if the project is really, it has accountability in the region, if it's already having key stakeholders that are convinced, or if it is an idea of a lonely genius, or if they are in the national planning development plan, if they are in the local development plan. So when you begin putting a lot of variables, that helps you measure if the project is ingrained in the reality and in the context, and if it's going to be move forward with the empowerment of people, or if the project is only really on the surface and it's going to fall after it stopped receiving the funding. So that would be the two elements I want to raise here. Thank you.
I need to add about how the project ends. Someone raised this issue. But I believe any project GCF, like Pa said, we are working on sustainability. It doesn't mean that it's not because the funding is over that the project should die or something like that. It depends. If the project is from a private sector, that means the project belong to this private entity. But if it's a project from the government, they need to transfer everything from the project to the one ministry. That's what's happened in DRC. We did it in one Readiness. We just transfer all the assets we had in this project to the government.
So thank you very much, and colleagues. Let us give a round of applause for the first to the first panelist. Thank you. That was great. Let me now go to the second list of panelists, and we have 45 minutes, so there is still time. Let me go to Ms. Nelson. What are the challenges that the specific countries are facing in terms of developing adaptation projects, and how is an accredited entity like SPREP and others doing? What are they doing to address those challenges?
Thank you very much, moderator, for that it's a very good question. You know, the Pacific states are at the forefront of the climate change impacts, yeah? We have very tiny islands. The population are very small. Our private sector are tiny as well as our civil societies. So taking that into context, then you see the big challenges in our small atolls and our small islands. If I can raise some key points here, the first problem is that I think there is a misunderstanding of, access to the Green Climate Fund, as well as because every organization, even in governments, they all want to become direct access entities, right? But they have no understanding of what that role means, what's expected of them, because it requires a lot of resources, not just the expertise, but also the money to enable them to work with the communities, to work with the private sectors and the NGOs, to actually pull together bankable proposals. The second point that I really want to make is understanding the baseline, understanding the science, which is evidence that builds the climate rationale that really directs or give the direction to where you're heading with this particular project. And making sure that everybody in your community are consulted. And I'm not talking about, one particular island. In most of our countries, there's more than 10 or 20 islands spread around the whole ocean. And we face a lot of logistical challenges to try and reach those communities. Take, for instance, the Federated States of Micronesia. They have 4 main states, right? And within those states, they have their own governments. And within those states, there's heaps of islands. And within those islands, they speak different languages. They have different cultures. They have different needs. They have different laws. And you can just imagine the challenges that we are facing trying to put together a project for, say, for instance, the Federated States of Micronesia, which I'm actually working with to develop their adaptation, their NAP proposal to access the $3 million to implement their adaptation planning process so that they can go through the process of identifying their adaptation priorities. It is difficult, and you're only given a certain amount of time to actually implement this project, and yet you have all these challenges. And so the approach that we are using is to make sure that we're working with the different governments of the different states within that particular country, all right? That represents the voices of the Pacific, of the communities in the different islands of those countries. The other element, and I think this is my last point, give the opportunity to the other speakers to talk to their issues as well. I think it's important, for the Green Climate Fund to really bring that level of information from that higher level really down to the communities. They really need to understand it, how the fund works, right? And what it means to be a direct, access entity, what it means to be a delivery partner, because there's different understanding everywhere, and I'm sure in other regions as well. Just to finish off, the one other thing that I really want to raise is that just to be mindful of the fact that the people in government are the same people who will represent the youth, same people who represent the private sector because they also have businesses, would be the same people who will be representing the civil society. So all these, from our tiny islands, they're wearing different hats. And so they do not have the energy and the headspace to really sit down, even for just one full day, and think about what is it that we need to do to adapt to climate change. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much for that insight. And Ms. Leslie, you are one of the biggest challenges in adaptation is the integration of the private sector. And Acumen has 3 GCF projects, including the Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund in 4 African countries, and also the Kawisavi Fund in 2 countries. Now, can you share with us lessons learned in developing and implementing these projects?
I can, thank you. I just want to applaud this group. The room is packed, and that's really incredible to see for a room talking about adaptation where there's clearly need. So I represent Acumen. We're a global nonprofit venture capital firm, and we were one of the first accredited entities with the Green Climate Fund. And we've learned so much in the process, and we wanted to share that today. So for us, it's completely about a capital spectrum. There's never been a moment like there is right now to leverage different sources of capital to make a project possible, especially philanthropy and first loss capital. I think we can all agree that, we've heard time and time again that private sector projects in adaptation are hard to come by. The World Bank tracked $30 billion going towards climate adaptation, and 1.6% of that was from the private sector. I was a 21-year-old intern working at a construction firm, and we worked on a $300 million highway project, and that's how much is going globally to adaptation, to adapting the world to climate change. If we've ever seen a problem, it's that one. We talk about community after community needing to find tools and resources for adaptation, but what can we do to move the private sector more towards tackling this problem? So the first thing that we shouldn't do is pretend like these are all commercial opportunities, because they're not. We're so early in the adaptation journey, and that's going to require philanthropy, first loss capital, and traditional investors working together to create solutions that people say, wow, that's really working. And it is early days, and thankfully the GCF sees that. So a few years ago, we launched the Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund to address this problem. We've seen that early stage equity investments were just severely lacking in agriculture, specifically in Africa. We have these agro-businesses, we have SMEs and startups working on solutions, but where are they going to go for early stage equity investment? And the answer was, well, there's very few places to go. So Acumen launched a $58 million fund called the Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund, ARAF. And it would not have been possible without the kind of catalytic capital the Green Climate Fund put into ARAF. $23 million of junior capital, sort of first loss, that then went on to attract $33 million of traditional capital, more commercial capital. And also us working with IKEA Foundation to secure $2 million where Acumen can put in that first loss capital as well. That kind of blend made it possible. And we didn't say this entirely needs to be philanthropy. We didn't say this needs to be entirely commercial. We recognized the blend that was needed to just put the risk at the right place to bring in the right kind of partners. The fund has already reached 500,000 people, made 5 investments, and 41% of the beneficiaries of the work are women, and 81% of the customers of the companies that we're supporting reported an increase in yield. So now we're seeing models starting to emerge, and you can start seeing these companies start to attract later stage capital, and thus we see the capital continuum. But Acumen wouldn't have been able to do this without the 15 years of experience that we're building on. We started investing in agriculture 15 years ago. We have 35 investments of companies, of models that we've seen work and not work. And we were honest about failures. You know, which companies just are not seeing scale and why, and what kind of accompaniment can we provide companies that might be struggling. And last thing I want to add in terms of the insights that we've gained is that you need partnerships, right? Not just capital partnerships, but the team at ARAF, they're using data in pre-investment to really understand, you know, what are the risks associated with this project. We're working with Winrock and a partner, a data platform, Aris, to assess the climate, both positive and negative implications of each transaction. We're working with 60 Decibels to look at, you know, are the products and services that this company that we may support actually beneficial for the end customer? Let's raise the voice of the communities that we're trying to serve and let them tell us if this product or service in agriculture is really working. And then base our investment decisions off of that. And again, post-investment, we have a technical assistance facility in addition to into the capital that we raised, because we know that agriculture's hard. We know adaptation's hard. And if we pretend like it's not, and we don't provide that accompaniment support, that technical assistance to help these companies work with their customers, you know, we might see more failures than we'd like. So just recognizing, again, the capital spectrum, emphasizing that now is the moment to bring in different types of capital to start building up adaptation so we can see it get the amount of capital and attention that we're seeing in mitigation as well.
Thank you. And Andrea, your team is responsible for evaluation. What are the key outcomes of the evaluation of adaptation projects? What are the challenges? And what is the importance of measuring the failures and the successes and coming up with some adaptive management and improving the work of GCF?
Sorry. Thank you, Pa, and again, thanks to the panelists to this honest and good discussion about the learnings that we all have in the GCF space. Needless to say, this is something that we work on and think about all day, every day here at the Independent Evaluation Unit, because we're trying to provide information that helps to improve the fund's operations where possible. So look, from my perspective, the IU evaluations were always conducted in clear sight of the mandates of the GCF and the GCF mandates given by the GCF board as well as by the COP, the Convention of Parties that we're hearing so much about these days. So drawing from some findings that we've had with the forward-looking performance review in 2019, we had highlighted that the GCF aims to fill that gap in climate finance, in the global climate finance game. And there was a need to reassess what a true niche the GCF could find and could play in terms of what sort of context we're living in. One, the context of needing climate finance and the context of providing finance given the climate emergencies. So in that context, we have had 4, and I wanted to present to you only four major key takeaways and lessons from our evaluation on the adaptation portfolio and approach by the GCF. So these are role, capacity, access, and measurement. And I believe we've spoken about all 4 of them today already. So some of these aspects will just be a rehash of what we heard already. So first to the role. So unlike other climate funds, the GCF avoids to define key concepts such as adaptation, climate rationale, traditional knowledge, innovation. And that is to allow flexibility, and that is flexibility for the countries to really think about their needs in their context. Every flexibility, as you can imagine, that's great to have that flexibility, but every flexibility also has a certain consequence. And the consequence is that the stakeholders, that the flexibility reduces the precision of the GCF policies, of the approaches and the strategies for the stakeholders to really look at the access to funds in a very effective and efficient manner. So this is very critical because we think that the GCF has the opportunity to make a considerable impact in adaptation. So we looked at the finance flows to non-OECD countries, and we found, given the current finance flows to those countries, that the GCF has about a 0.3% market share in mitigation. That's rather small. In adaptation, it's about 2%. So we're already seeing that the GCF can go and have a far better impact in the adaptation market as such. So this is to the role that still needs to be clarified. The second point I wanted to bring is capacity, and we've heard about RPSP as the Readiness and Preparatory Support Program, but also other things about coordination in the countries. And what we found in the evaluation is that at the current state, the GCF has no good approach to promote efficiency in pursuing the coordination that we need at the country level and the coordination that we need at a project level. What I mean by that is when we interviewed our country counterparts in the countries, we found that developing countries, in particular the CITs, and we have some more representatives here, as well as the LDCs, highlighted high transaction costs in accessing the climate finance as one of the key challenges. And that translates into that high coordination cost that we see in the countries, coordinating between the different donors and the different funders, all from the MDBs all the way to the bilateral donors, in finding these adequate partners and addressing these recipient needs that we have. And so the countries, and this is something we've heard from Colombia today as well, from our representative here from the NDA in Colombia, the countries require that help to matchmake. And that matchmaking is really key between the countries and the climate needs, as well as the potential entities, the potential delivery partners that could help implement those projects that we so urgently need. So, and my last point here to this is also when we look at the effective and efficient use of the Readiness and Preparatory Support Program, which is crucial to provide that stepwise approach to initiate this, we find that that's still a considerable challenge to use this effectively and efficiently. So predictability of funds is a concern for many in the countries, because the approval of readiness support programs for adaptation planning, for instance, can take anything from 14 days up to 3 years. So that predictability in that space of capacity is a concern. The third one, and I'm sorry, I'm struck for time, so I'm going to keep it very, very short. The third one is on access. And what we found is, and this is particularly relevant in light of the IPCC report as well as the COP discussions that we have this week and last week, the GCF adaptation portfolio and pipeline consists of very, very few programs. So essentially, it's 4 out of 67 that are true larger programs that could take care of larger problems. Most of them are grant financed, so 96% of all of those are grant financed, so we're not seeing the private sector there yet, and they are largely dominated by international accredited entities. To give you a number to this, 6 UN and EU organizations receive more than 50% of the entire funds in adaptation by the GCF. So direct access is an issue. Approval of adaptation projects are taking extremely long. So just to give you an average number, it's taking about 350 days from submission to approval. And then it takes on average, another 449 days with the legal arrangements that need to follow. So this is taking very, very long, and it the trend is increasing, considering the current projects in the pipeline, so considering everything that we have from submission of concept notes to the approval stage. And this is a concern, but you know, we remain hopeful, and we are very happy that we have these findings, because it's important to recognize the problem before you can tackle it. And as I said, the private sector and innovative financial instruments, they're there, but they're very few, and unfortunately they're not sufficiently considered in the adaptation portfolio. So we currently have only, until recently, we had only 2 PSFs, so private sector facility projects, that would look at adaptation purely. That means that between the 21st board meeting, so October 2018 to October 2020, we only had 2 projects that accounted for $10.8 million in adaptation, private sector adaptation finance. That's too little. So that is not, the GCF in that way is not using fully the potential that it has. But we see improvement, as you have heard today. So lastly, on measurement, and that's always something very close to my heart, at least as an evaluator. So when we look at measurement, the key challenge here in measurement is the definition of key concepts. So traditional knowledge, innovation, as I said initially, they're still not defined. It is good for the flexibility. It is not so good when you think about how to truly measure what sort of impact we have. And that's in particular important because the concept of innovation plays an integral part in paradigm shift. And that's a key mandate of the fund. So from our perspective, that's an issue to raise. So on top of that, the GCF has no particular approach to achieving impact in the adaptation portfolio, and that's due to the fact that we're using various frameworks. So we're using the investment framework with the investment criteria. Kavita was mentioning those of sustainability and impact potential. And at a certain stage, then we're resulting into results management framework, into the results management framework, which then looks at the results. So in a way, the fund looks ex ante at the investment criteria, which is called investment potential, but it doesn't set targets and targeted impacts that we would all need. So that we find is a challenge into allowing us to steer the portfolio that we have to high impact. And to just give you an idea here really quickly, and that's my last point, very last point here, is that we looked at the results management framework. So what the fund does is it had eight areas for results management. 4 for mitigation, 4 for adaptation. When we looked at the adaptation ones, one is looking at livelihoods of vulnerable people and communities. That result area is chosen over 91% in all of the adaptation projects. So it doesn't. It's used as a chapeau to say yes, we're definitely doing this, but it doesn't allow us to really truly consider the steering that we would like to have when we look at the adaptation projects. I stop here. I don't give you the recommendations yet. Perhaps we have that in the discussion. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and looking forward to the discussions yet.
Thank you, Andreas, for that insight. And before I open the floor to the audience, maybe I can ask Kavita. I know over the years we've been trying to see how we can speed up the process and also blend in more private sector projects in the pipeline. What can you say about the latest improvements, particularly for 2021?
Thank you, Pa, and thank you, Andres, for bringing those. GCF is a learning organization, and the more we do measurements and learning from our data, the better we will become. And these insights definitely are something that is allowing us to put into practice some better measurements. 2021 saw some dramatic improvement in our approval pipelines for adaptation. I'll give you the example. It's a small island example, the MCT project, the Micronesia Conservation Trust project that we approved recently. It was the first disbursement was made in under 200 days. Is it universally true for all projects? Not yet, but we are getting there. We're looking at all possible ways to improve our processes and systems, whether it's IT solutions or whether it is our own internal processes. We aren't there yet, but we're getting there. In terms of private sector projects, we have this year, again, 2021 saw some catalytic projects come through with the private sector window. The CRAFT, which is a resilient adaptation project funding, again, large large-scale project for mobilizing private sector equity through first loss. That was done this year. The other one was the Coral Reef project, again, mobilized a lot of funding on that. Even the fund that the Tanzania project, CRDB, was a private sector commercial bank, DAE bank out of that. So I think we are getting there. But we're getting there only because you are able to measure the data and let us know what we're doing wrong so that we can fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I would still open the floor if the audience have any questions to the panelists. Oath. Nobody is asking for the floor? Okay, madam. Okay. So we have two. Mics to them, please.
My name is Jean-Jacques Bambuta. I'm working for the Ministry of Environment in DRC. I'm in charge of peatland in DRC. We have at this moment a readiness proposal in the pipeline, in the GCF pipeline. My question to the team in charge of project evaluation of projects is this: taking into account countries' challenge on adaptation, as Mr. Jamba was saying, it seems that the amount that is dedicated to the readiness can not cover all the readiness issues. Now, in your evaluation, have you seen this case in which some activities that were maybe listed in the readiness it wasn't possible to realize those activities because the amount that GCF is giving on the readiness proposal maybe is not important. We are talking about $300,000 in dollars. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the lady behind, madam, and then we have the gentleman here.
Hello, good afternoon. I have a consulting company, Real-Time Change, and we work with project developers in different countries, the DRC and in Mozambique. A question is, how do you see the integration between climate finance with projects that also have the generation of carbon credits to be sold on voluntary or compliance markets, how that blended? Because obviously you have issues then with ownership of credits or the additionality. I'd just like to know how you see that moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I just stepped in late, but I could capture the first recommendation which I see out of the evaluation. It says GCF has to still develop its vision for adaptation. I think it might be true. I'm the chair of the National Trust for Conservation of Nature in Nepal. And then this NC has just been accredited to GCF. So my question is, how this vision, unclear vision is restricting the fast tracking of the proposals, because I'm in the process of submitting proposal and I want to learn how you can really learn from all the experience, and our application will have quite a bit of elements of adaptation. So, that learning is very important for us, and I would like to hear from GCF what as a potential applicant, future applicant, I can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Andreas, could you answer the first two questions?
Thank you. Thanks. This is how far we can go with preparation, right? But honestly, Jean, thanks for the question on RPSP. And RPSP, look, it's no doubt it's a large program. It has a multitude of facets and a multitude of different different mandates and different targets, as you correctly said. Look, we've done in 2018, which is quite some time ago, an evaluation on the RPSP, where we said, if I can paraphrase, we said there is a sort of mission overload with when it comes to readiness. So we need to consider that readiness cannot do everything in a country, cannot guarantee all the different parts of capacity building, but it should definitely look into the capacity building efforts and the strengthening of the capacity of the NDA, as well as the direct access entities that wish to be, or the candidates for those that wish to be candidates for direct access, as well as the preparation of a portfolio pipeline. So when you refer to project evaluations, I'll be very mute and very silent on this. As an independent evaluation unit, we look at the operations, we look at a certain set of a portfolio of projects. We don't do project evaluations per se, but I recognize your challenges with the limits that you may get in terms of the funding. So let me just say this: what we've learned is, it is a concern that there is there is a mission overload where many targets. That is something that has been addressed by Pa and his team in the RPSP Strategy 2.0, where these things have been put in place. Now it's about time to get down to business and think about how we can go with this vision and with this strategy. So the strategy is in place, but what is a current concern for us is, and I didn't mention this in my presentation, is that unfortunately we don't have a measurement system to measure the success of readiness, and that has been in the past very challenging for us. So we don't know as of yet perfectly if RPSP is reaching all its objectives and the various objectives that it has put out. And then along those lines, we're unfortunately in this position where we don't realize fully of what activities have helped indeed to strengthen the capacity that we want, right? The set out for the 300,000, that's the set out for the NDA strengthening. Any additional funds would be to other targets that you may have. They need to be clearly set at the get-go when you are about to ask for readiness support funds. So at that point, you would have to clearly come up with a plan of where the funds would be used, and that is the story to that. I hope that sheds some light to this. The current evaluation that we do on the least developed countries looks far deeper into this discussion. So the DRC will definitely, in your case, will definitely feature there to say, we looked at that from the least developed countries because they are obviously in urgent need of the readiness and preparatory funds. The findings I can't speak on yet because we're just about to finalize the report. So in a short while you will know far more. So towards the end of the year, December, we'll be publishing the report on that. Thanks for the question. The second question, apologies that it took so long. The second question from the lady from Real Time Change, lovely title. I'll love to repeat that more. The integration of project blended with the carbon certification. So at this point, excellent point. At this point, that is certainly a challenge for the GCF to look at that in far more detail. We have not done an evaluation on the mitigation portfolio per se, but one thing that we've realized is when it comes to measurement, and when we look at the different indicators that we have set out in the results management framework, we're very fortunate that this has just been reviewed on the basis of our early report on the results management framework review in 2018. The framework has been changed. We're very fortunate to see that they're now considering far more the enabling environments for projects. So we're not only looking at tons of carbon emissions reduced and so on. We're actually looking far deeper into the qualitative parts of the projects, and I hope that will foster that better understanding and will bring out the linkage between projects, the implementation, as well as the question for carbon certification and the question that you have had here. One thing that we have to said in the past, and I'm happy to say it again, is that when we now look back to the adaptation portfolio, one thing that we identified is currently the GCF is not so onerous, because we're working in a second line due diligence. So we're working with international accredited entities such as the World Bank, such as UNDP, that have obviously their own results management frameworks. So we're not as onerous, but we're asking simply what are the direct and indirect beneficiaries. That as an indicator for adaptation is very difficult. It's difficult for two reasons. One, the aggregability of that information. You have various projects, each on the different projects. You go from private sector as well as public sector projects. They have a very different understanding in their context of what is a direct beneficiary and what is an indirect beneficiary. So aggregability of that information is very difficult, if not impossible. The next question is double counting. So we ought to look at how to link it to the SDGs, as this is the best way forward to create to reduce errors in double counting. And that is also an issue that we've seen in the evaluations. I stop here. Thanks.
No, thank you very much. And I think to your question in terms of learning, as a newly accredited entity, we are at your service to support you in terms of developing concept notes, and you have another accredited entity, a direct access entity in Nepal, which you can also partner. But we have the regional team that is ready to support you if you have any challenges or difficulties in learning from us, and we can provide all the support that you need, from concept note development all the way to post-accreditation challenges. All recommendations that and conditions that we are giving post-accreditation, we could also support you address them. Now, ladies and
can I just add one thing? Yeah. The only thing I would add to what Pa said was to keep in mind that Green Climate Fund is not looking for just traditional development projects. So that crucial difference is what, if you start from that lens, I think things become simpler. We are looking at climate impact projects, and that becomes the lens through which, if you seek support from our various support mechanisms and others, the clarity will be much better at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, we are running out of time, but I would want to ask the panelists to just give their last word, starting from the far. I know that Andres was the last to speak, but I would just want you to start from that end. Your last words, please.
Yeah, my last words would be, I've been part of another side event with IFAD, and one of the key things that we had there in the discussions about adaptation is complexity. We're now entering an epoch of the anthropogenic, where we find ourselves with the human system as well as with the climate system, both very complex systems, and we are trying to integrate both. So complexity and complex systems thinking will be key in the future. And we're happy to say that we are starting with mapping tools here at the IAU to look at that in far more greater detail. I think that will be a challenge for the future. And I really hope that the coordination that needs to happen between the GCF and others is leading to this complex system thinkings with good partnerships and good partners at the side, such as we see today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Nelson?
Thank you, Pa. Just final comments from me. I think I just want to emphasize, the importance of linking up adaptation planning as well, because sometimes people just think about adaptation planning as just a document. All they want to do is to develop a document. Adaptation planning is a process to bring in all the relevant stakeholders, including the youth, as they've voiced their concerns here, to be part of that planning process. But what's also important is the science. And we've always struggled with the science. But we're very grateful to some of our, the research community within the Pacific and our big countries like Australia and New Zealand, who is supporting getting the science to us, to our Pacific community, so that they have a good understanding of what's expected in the future, what those climate impacts might look like on their traditional systems of livelihoods and whatnot. And also the existence of our islands, whether we'll still be there or not in the next 100 or so years. So that's quite important. One other thing that I really want to emphasize is the importance of monitoring and evaluation systems. Yeah, most of the time M&E is developed and undertaken just to satisfy the requirements by the funders and the donors, but not as a process to enable learning, within our communities, between communities and governments and all the players in the country, and also, with the funders, because we need to learn what we've done well and what we haven't done well, just like the points by Kavita about the learning by the GCF. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you for highlighting that. I think in the planning, we are saying adaptation planning process and national adaptation plans. So you have to go through the vulnerability assessment, looking at the strategies, the coordinating mechanisms, institutional strengthening, and then come up with investment plans that would lead to the document of the national adaptation plan. So I think it would be good for us to really clarify this so that countries have a better understanding. Next, please, Madam.
Thank you. I've been so encouraged by the wide range of topics that we've covered on here. Really, I think we've gone to all corners of adaptation, everything from project prep to execution. I think in adaptation, which is such a complicated, multi-dimensional, multi-stakeholder issue, you do need to have a sense of an imagination and to think outside the box with solutions. And you need to learn from what's working and what's not. To apply that level of imagination, you're going to quickly find out that you need many different people to partner to make this work. And when you're a capital provider such as Acumen, you realize that you can only go so far, and you need your partners to also be thinking outside the box with you. And GCF did that with us. Our delivery partners certainly did that with us, thinking about listening to farmers and listening to the smallholder farmers to make sure that in the countries where we're operating, that change that we're hoping to seek is made. And when it's not, learn from it. Don't just walk away from it. So through that imagination, build partnerships, and ultimately, that's what's going to drive more private sector financing towards adaptation.
Thank you very much. And Santiago?
Yeah, thank you. Well, final comment to highlight the importance of not centering on the amount of money mobilized from the GCF only. I think that at least for Colombia, and we have been quite successful mobilizing great projects and mobilizing readiness funding projects. But I think what has really been more valuable is the knowledge, and it's having someone that is really setting up the bar really, really high. Sometimes really high, and we know that it keeps changing and moving higher. So all the people is saying, okay, how come they're now like being more demanding? How come they're being more demanding? But it's nice seeing that flexibility, and that's something that is not easy capturing. The value it represents to a country, the value it represents to NAP, to adaptation processes, but for us as a country, it has been invaluable because it has create like a ripple effect in the whole like system of adaptation. So thank you again for all that and for the invitation.
Okay, thank you, Hans.
Okay, I want to go in the same direction because I believe people sometimes when they do the NAP, they say, okay, we did our job. It's a process. That means the one case we lived, I think, like I say, we have in DRC. After doing the preliminary NAP, one of my collaborators I sent him to go to visit just one province to see how things are going there. He came and he told me, you know what? We have now 140 erosion in the town, just after 6 months. That's why I believe we need to go in the field now. We need to have some committee locally following up on all these issues. That's what we need to have at 2 levels. following. Because if we don't do that, we'll be coming with money just to fund the pipeline, but we find, like I said, worse than what we left. We need to bring this committee to be operational in the province level, not in the main city. That's what I can just say as my last word.
Thank you for that. Kavita?
Thank you, Pa, and thank you all the panelists. It's been a very, very rich discussion, and I've learned so much. I'm really humbled by the challenges that you've been talking about in the SIDS and the country context, province and local level. From GCF's perspective, I think to be able to play the role that we are expected to play and that we have the vision to play, scaling up adaptation programs and using the value of the network that we've put together to bring that about, I think would be the thing that we would look to go forward. To give an example how much of that challenge it is, in one of the outcome areas that we work in for adaptation, which is livelihoods of people and communities, we have 121 projects, but the total value of committed funding is only $1.4 billion, compared to 50+ projects in energy access and mitigation, which is double that amount. So we do need, so GCF is working hard along with partners to be able to get that many projects to commitment. We have processed between 5 to 10 times those, right? So we're working hard, but how can we work more smartly with the network we put together to put together platforms that can scale much more easily and can be replicated much faster? And that's where we would like to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done, all the panelists. I think this was very interesting, and we've learned a lot. And we've also learned from the questions that you asked. I just want to thank you all for your presence. Can we give a round of applause to my panelists?